And welcome back to another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports Podcast over today's sports. It's a show where I talk about why I, Richard Harris, prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s over today's sports. It's more of like an editorial. I think it's more of an educational show to teach you all certain things that people of my generation feel, believe, seen, know, and why we feel our era is better than today. Earlier this week, I told you there were 4 reasons why I did this show, and I gave you a couple. And I saved this one because this one is ever evolving, and it's probably one of the biggest reasons why I do the show, and it's the GOAT discussion. Now, because we have mostly African Americans doing the talk show circuit these days, they don't talk about golf, they don't talk about tennis, and they don't talk about baseball, they don't talk about hockey. They talk only about football and basketball because they feel that is what they know. Stronger than the other sports, probably. I feel I'm well-rounded in all sports, that I could talk about every sport and talk about this topic in every sport. The number one reason why I dislike the GOAT discussion is sports have, in my opinion, regressed. And so people today think that what they're witnessing when they're witnessing things is the greatest things they've ever seen. I think there are several reasons why we all have for saying one person, man or woman, is better than everybody else. But I think this generation of sport has regressed, is not as good as the prior generations because things in prior generations were more valued. For example, the basketball discussion, everyone talks about the fact that LeBron has scored more points than everybody, and he's been in more finals than most. He's probably the most overhyped athlete in the history of the sport that actually lived up to his hype. There's only one other person in his class in that regard, probably, and that would be Tiger Woods, which we'll get to in a moment. Michael Jordan was never hyped as a high school phenom, didn't make the varsity team till 11th grade. But my point simply is the things that people value today in sports are not the same things that we valued when we watch sports. Probably the second reason why we think Jordan is better than LeBron is defense. Nobody thinks LeBron's a great defensive player. The reason why we think Montana is better, that I think Montana is better than Brady, is no one ever talks about Montana's defense, which was outstanding. Not his defense, but his team's defense. But people don't talk about how Brady won Super Bowls not because of him all the time. They won because of their defense. And in fact, in actual Super Bowl games, Brady's greatest performance was a loss. He threw for 500 yards in a game in the Super Bowl and lost. How can you be the greatest player of all time to throw for 500 yards and still lose? But I want to talk a little bit more about the other sports, the individual sports today. Boxing is a perfect example as to what I'm saying about the GOAT conversation. There's a man right now named Tyson Fury who's 270 pounds. He is the heavyweight champion of the world. He is the embodiment of what heavyweight is, super heavyweight is. That's the division that they had in the Olympics. That's the division they had in boxing. When I was a kid, it wasn't professional. It was heavyweight was heavyweight. Nobody was bigger than maybe 230. And if they were bigger than 230, they got their butts kicked usually. But a 270 pound, 250 pound, 260 pound heavyweight champion, we didn't see that in my day. And so I can't say Tyson Fury is not better than Lennox Lewis or better than Mike Tyson or better than other fighters because the man is enormous. And he got a chin, his chin is as was tested in his fights in recent months and years against Wilder especially. The fact of the matter is it's so hard to gauge who is the GOAT of boxing just based on the simple fact that the other divisions have great fighters as well. We tend to give the heavyweight division a nod because we assume and believe that the biggest man would beat the smaller man if they fought. But over history, we've seen that the guy who's a heavyweight has lost to a cruiserweight, has lost to the light heavyweight champion. Michael Moore, Evander Holyfield, Roy Jones Jr. beat heavyweight fighters. So that, to me, is part of the embodiment of the GOAT discussion that is convoluted because you can't really say someone is the greatest boxer of all time because the weight classes have all changed and it's confusing. To me, Roger Federer is the greatest tennis player to ever play. Everyone thinks it's Djokovic because he has won the most majors. In fact, professional tennis players who used to play tennis say it's Djokovic, and I completely disagree with him. And I completely disagree with their theories. Why? For me, Djokovic came up at the right time. He came up at a time period where there was really only 3 guys, maybe 4 guys, who could challenge him. But he wasn't dominant from the start. He wasn't this guy that was a 19-year-old phenom, a 16-year-old phenom, like Monica Seles or, Serena Venus. He wasn't one of the young guns that came up and was sensational. He's evolved into a great player. But I don't remember memorable matches that he had playing against greater players. Roger Federer came up in an era where the best player in the world was a man named Pete Sampras. And Roger Federer only played Pete Sampras once. And he defeated him at Wimbledon in an epic 3-hour, 41-minute match. Roger Federer faced Andre Agassi a lot because for some reason they always ended up on the same side of the bracket. He faced Agassi 11 times, which shocks me, but only faced Sampras once. My point by saying all that is Federer's rise to the top, he had to go through greater players than Nadal, than Djokovic. Federer came up through the era where Lleyton Hewitt was still good, Patrick Rafter was still around, Pete Sampras was still around, Andre Agassi was still around, and he had to figure out ways to get through them. There was Del Potro. There was good players coming up in the era where Federer had to develop what he was, and he developed what he was, and his era of dominance is unparalleled because he played against better players and beat them. Crushed Andy Roddick. And he crushed Djokovic and Nadal and Murray until he got older They got wiser. They learned how to play against them better, and they finally defeated him. And people bring up the fact that Djokovic has a better record against Federer. Same thing with Nadal. But most of that was when they got older and he got much older. And so I have a hard time giving them the nod over Federer because when all else was equal, which never was because Federer obviously is older than all those guys, he kicked their butts. And if you take the clay court out of the situation with Nadal, he has a winning record against Nadal. Plus, to me, based on my eye test, watching the matches played, he is the most gifted tennis player ever to swing a tennis racket. He had everything. He had every shot. He had every response. And so I look at that and I say, you break them down. Nadal's great because he's the greatest grinder of tennis of all time. And what is a grinder? A grinder is somebody who makes you fight for every single point, doesn't give up a point, will fight it no matter what. No matter if you hit the most incredible shot, he finds a way to get it back and keep you playing. That wasn't Federer. That was Nadal. Federer hit unbelievable winning shots after you hit an amazing shot. After you grinded a point with Nadal, he had an answer. That's what made him better to me than Nadal. Djokovic is in between. Djokovic plays like Federer, but can grind like Nadal. So if you're asking me who I'm taking, I'm always going to take Federer because I know that he is going to hit a winning shot most of the time. And let's go to golf. The Tiger Woods debate with Jack Nicklaus and others. The reason why people like Tiger, the reason why I'm going to speak for other people. The reason why I like Tiger, and I think Tiger is the greatest golfer that I've ever seen in all time, you never hear stories about Jack Nicklaus in the woods. And you say, what does that mean? That was Tiger's nickname, Tiger in the Woods, because every single time he would hit a golf shot, you never knew where it was going to land. Was it going to be in the rough? Was it going to be in the woods? Was it going to be in the trees? Was it going to be in the fairway? You knew if you hit it in the fairway, you were done. But you also knew that if you hit it in the rough, there's a chance you're done. And you knew if you hit it in the woods, there's a chance you're done too. To me, he's the greatest scrambler ever. Phil Mickelson hit magical shots, beautiful shots that you wouldn't think people would think of. Imagination incredible. But Tiger Woods, somehow, some way, would figure out how to get out of the woods and score, how to get out of the rough and score. And when he gave an explanation as to why he never was out of a point or never was out of a shot, it blew me away. And what he said was, I would hit shots and the ball would go a certain place, and I knew that I'm okay in those spots because as long as I had an opening, I had a shot. And that's extraordinary. Jack never played in the woods. Jack was in the fairway a lot. And that's what makes what Tiger did extraordinary. To, what is it, 150 something weeks straight of making cuts by not being accurate, by hitting the ball all over the yard is extraordinary. And the sad thing is, the only reason his streak ended is because his father died. Can you imagine? The weekend of the U.S. Open, the weekend was also Father's Day weekend. Your father dying, you ain't concentrate. That's the only reason why his cut streak ended, which is crazy. And that's why he's the GOAT to me, because Jack may have more majors. Jack had more second place finishes, which is incredible. But the fact of the matter is, when you watch somebody play, that's why I put Federer and Tiger in the same class. When you watch somebody play and they play the game in a way that you've never seen before, they're the GOATs. I never saw Rod Laver play, but they say his style of tennis was beautiful. He won the majors. He did the Grand Slam twice. I can't criticize what I ain't see. But he looked like a maestro on the court. But I did see Federer play, and I ain't never seen anyone play better than he. I ain't never seen anyone more dominant than he playing at a particular time. Now, on the women's side, people are mad that Serena's getting all this love because they don't give Margaret Court love. Margaret Court apparently had 2 kids during her career, and some of the players who played in her era criticize her because they say she didn't play against all the best players all the time because all the best players couldn't afford to get to the matches around the world to play. People say, well, Steffi Graf, the last woman to win the Grand Slam in one calendar year and win the gold medal of the Olympics. But then they say, then Monica Seles came along and challenged that notion, and for some crazy, obscure reason, Monica Seles, Arantxa Sanchez Vicario, who had no power, who had no description of a game, what she had was guts. She played like Nadal. She was crafty, drove Steffi Graf crazy, and beat her. Now, Steffi beat her much more than Sanchez Vicario beat her, but the bottom line is Steffi Graf couldn't dominate Sanchez Vicario when people thought she should have. But to me, she's the greatest player I ever saw. And I love Serena. But my problem with Serena is they used to say she had like a soft spot for certain players. She didn't like dominating people because she felt the media was going to give her grief for dominating the person. No way in the world she should not have won the Grand Slam that year when she lost to that lovely Italian lady at the U.S. Open. No way. No way. But it was kind of like Sanchez Vicario versus Steffi Graf. The Italian player was very crafty. She frustrated her with her spin, with her slice, with her net play, and it was crazy. But she got it done. Track and field, Carl Lewis was sensational. Carl Lewis ran the 100, the 200, and did the long jump. Usain Bolt, he just did the running. He didn't do any jumping. And so I'm comfortable saying that Carlos was the greatest track athlete I ever saw. But I'm also comfortable saying that what Bolt did will never be done again. Nobody's going to do 3 Olympics in a row and win the 100, 200, and the relay 3 times in a row, unless they start their career as a 19-year-old and can have like 4 Olympics in, like some of the basketball players have, and some of the swimmers have, and so on and so forth. I could talk about this topic all day long because I feel my generation of sport produced a standard that this generation of sport has not lived up to. I could talk about Montana over Brady because I watched the Broncos and the 49ers Super Bowl where I literally sat in my living room and was like, I was absolutely scared. I was like, whoa, that is something I've never seen. And I've watched every Super Bowl that Brady's participated in and never felt that emotion. I felt that the Patriots were better than teams, but they didn't beat my Giants team twice. They didn't beat the Eagles the second time. They got it the first time. The second Rams Super Bowl, they took advantage of the fact that the Rams, Todd Gurley didn't play or didn't play well, was injured, and the Rams didn't use him like they normally use him. Like, I could come up with an excuse for everything to do with that Super Bowl and all of Brady's runs, but I can't say that I watched Tom Brady play in a Super Bowl and was freaked out and scared as I was when I saw the 49ers dismantle Denver. I've only felt that emotion when Doug Williams had that quarter in the second quarter against Denver. Denver got a lot of abuse, it sounds like. But there was no doubt in my mind against Cincinnati the second time he was going to drive the ball 92 yards and win that game. There was no doubt in my mind that he was going to beat Marino. What do I say every time I do a show? Whenever I say true stuff, there's always sirens behind me. My voice starts to go. I think that's funny. Anyway, that's my take, y'all. Enjoy and have a tremendous, fun weekend. Great college football games this weekend. Enjoy.